Hello, beautiful, bright, shiny souls. Marte Siebenhar here. Quantum Healing Hypnosis Level 2 Practitioner and founder of Quantum Healing Miami. Here to unpack the question, can left-brained people be hypnotized? And this is something that more people are nervous and worried about when they're looking to get hypnosis than other people might expect. So because this has come up a couple times lately, I wanted to jump in here and address it in case that was helpful to any of you who might be considering a QHHT session. Just as a reminder, quantum healing hypnosis technique is also known as QHHT. I know it just rolls off the tongue, but it is an amazing transformative technique piloted by, created by, launched by, refined by the amazing Dolores Cannon several years ago, 45 years ago or so. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Glad to see you here. Susie, Kay, and Lillian. Hi. So left brain. So what does this mean? So when we're working with hypnosis, and especially QHHT, we are working with a different part of your brain than you normally use probably in most of your awake and aware times. So, and that's the beauty of it. So Dolores used to joke that when she was speaking with other hypnotists who did not go into the theta brainwave state, which is right before you go to sleep, between full awakeness and asleep, there's the theta brainwave state. Just closing your eyes and like doing a guided visualization is more the alpha state. When you have your eyes open, you're in the beta state. So we work in the theta brainwave state, which is the deepest level of trance. And she used to joke around with other, hi Laura. She used to joke around with other practitioners that don't go to theta because that's where the weird stuff starts to happen. And in fact, she was totally all about the weird stuff happening. And that's why she created her technique to specifically go there. So we go there. And for those of you, a couple of people here on this live who have been through quantum healing hypnosis technique, when you're in that state, you are not in your rational mind. You're more in an experiential, creative, sensory experience. And that's how you know you're in theta. If your senses are engaged, like you're there, you're seeing, you're sensing, you're smelling, you're feeling with your body or your skin, if you happen to be in a body in that experience, which is a whole other video that we can talk about another time. But kind of like in a dream, but you're a little bit more with it than in a complete dream. But you're on your way to the dream with all of your senses engaged. That is very much what it's like to be in theta brainwave state. So when you're in your dream state, if you can recognize and remember, reconnect with that for a minute, you are not necessarily making choices that make sense. So we are working with a part of you that is hooked in with universal energy, with source, with whatever you want to call it, but the energy that is connecting us all. So things over there don't necessarily make sense. So the question is, if you're left-brained in your waking state, can you really access that part of you, the creative, intuitive part of you, when you're in theta brainwave state? And the answer is yes. So short answer to those of you watching this video, can left-brain people be hypnotized? Yes. Yes, everybody goes through the theta brainwave state twice a day very naturally, before sleep and before waking up. It is something you do so naturally, you don't know that's what's happening, which is really cool because it means that this is not something that is unfamiliar. When you do QHHT, you're just being guided directly there. And so you're working with a person. Normally, you don't have a practitioner there as you're waking up and falling asleep. So it's just more facilitated so that you are in a place where in that theta brainwave state, you can be guided through and then be asked questions. And the cool thing about QHHT is that yes, it is completely natural. There are no substances, there's no touching. It's completely safe. Even pregnant women can do it. So there's really a lot that can happen that is of great potential in that state. And again, in that state, you are not in your left brain, rational, logical mind, and you can discover things about yourself that you would never discover from your full waking, logical, needs to make sense, beautiful part of yourself. And because we are primarily not noticing that, even if we're left brain primarily when we're awake, we do have a very strong part of us that is this creative, intuitive part of us in the right brain. Even if you're not using that all the time, it is still very much part of you, and it is still a place that you go in your dream state and in other ways. Also, if you use your phone and you lose track of time, you've definitely been in trance. If your eyes are open, you're not in theta state, but the mind needs to relax sometimes. So it's actually I believe, I don't have scientific evidence, but I believe that if you were having your rational thinking mind drive you all the time, you'd be exhausted in a very short amount of time. So I think sometimes we go into a trance state as a way of getting ourselves off the hook a little bit and tuning out from the things that we might not actually need the brain processing power to do. Certain things you're familiar with, proprioceptive things, that means things that you are familiar with doing in your body. Like, you don't necessarily have to think about what order you do the things in the shower, whether you get wet first and then is it your face, or do you start with the soap or whatever it is. You don't think about that. If you're driving a car, when you're first driving it, you have to kind of figure out what that's like and pay a lot of attention. And then later on, you're not really actively thinking about those things. So a lot of our lives are actually spent in some sort of trance or some sort of automatic response. When you are, and that's the creative brain that is taking over. When you're an athlete and you're moving through space, you practice so that you know how to move through space. That's not something you use a logical thought process to go through. So you're actually using that part of your brain several times per day in your waking state. And that's also a place that you pass through on your way to the sleeping state. So yes, you can be hypnotized if you're left brain. And I want to tell you about two clients I had in the past couple of weeks who came in specifically nervous and worried about whether they would be able to be hypnotized because they consider themselves to be primarily more kind of logical, rational people. And I consider myself to be that way most of the time too. It's only in the last couple of years when I had a spiritual awakening and I really started to notice that I had other parts of myself that I wasn't using to the fullest. So this work is highly intuitive, and it took really getting into that state and learning to work with it. So I always had it. I didn't necessarily work with it on purpose, but now I do. And when I'm working with QHHT clients, I'm very much in that creative, intuitive space where we are creating it together. And I have the technique, I have the process. It's highly, it's structured. There's an order, there's a flow. That's part of what I spent my training and the couple hundred hours that I've spent doing client sessions by now. I know the process, and they're in between the process in specific and in general. There are opportunities for you to really use your intuition to guide the questions or to ask follow-ups or to just work with the client to get clear into their experience as to what is happening. And that's part of what I love about it, is a very intuitive process. So now I'm using that part of myself to help people gain clarity and to accomplish transformation, which is the absolute most satisfying, amazing job that I can think about. This is just such an honor and such a privilege. So my two clients, okay. So the first client came in and she didn't say this at the time, but she seemed a little bit nervous when I was walking through the 3 steps of what QHHT entails. She was like, yeah, but is it really going to work? And I said, of course it's going to work. It works every time, and it really does. And, I have the experience to know that now because I've done hundreds of hours of sessions, and it works every time. It's really amazing. I've worked with Amazon executives. I've worked with teachers. I've worked with CEOs, people who are need to be functionally very logical and rational in their work in order to do what they do. So she's like, I just don't know what it's going to be like. And so I just talked her through it. It was like, today you can let go anything that you want to let go. That's something I tell my clients every time, but that will be up to you. And this is a very special occasion that we have the potential, the opportunity to access the part of you that knows everything about your current life and all the other lives that you've ever lived. So it's really up to you if you want to take advantage of that experience. All you need to do is just recognize that there's this part of you that is part of you that you use all the time, you're very familiar with, but because it's not outside of you, you might not even notice that you're there and you're working with it all the time. Very natural, is part of you. So what we're going to do is we're going to trust the process, because the process is perfect. Dolores Cannon's process is perfect. And we're going to trust that your higher self brought you here to share information with you that you're seeking and that can help you in the very best way possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into our senses. We're going to really feel your way through. And if you have these questions bubble up, like, what is this? Is it a story? Am I making it up? Does it make sense? Where did that come from? All of those things just go to the side. So that part of you that is questioning just goes to the side. In a dream, again, weird things happen. You don't have necessarily control, but you go with it. And that's exactly what we do in QHHT. Because that part of us that wants to give us information will use all sorts of different ways to show us meaning and to help us understand. It doesn't make sense. So if you start trying to make sense of it, you get to relax and let go and just step aside and let that creative part of you come forward. And really great advice I learned from Suzanne Spooner, who's a level 3 practitioner. There are a couple basic guidelines that we can implement, and those are trust and say the very first thing that comes to mind. Again, this part of you knows the answers. It is never hesitant, it is not worried, it is not hesitant, it knows. So whatever comes forward, and that could be a sensation, that could be a feeling, that could be a sensory experience, but usually it's words. So trust and say the very first thing that comes to mind. Often we say that thing or we hear that and we're like, that doesn't make sense, and then we don't do it. And then something happens. I love for you to document what happens when you don't go with that or when you do go with that. I think that's a really interesting experiment. The second thing is describe whatever it is in as much detail as possible. And if you're really allowing your senses to come through, you're going to have an amazing session because you know how to use your senses and you know how to gather information. So again, that part of you that is in your senses doesn't need to make sense of anything. So you can let that part really flow through. The third thing is talk. So as we get into the experience, information is revealed as we orient ourselves. Again, like when you're learning to back up a car, you have to really think about what you're doing. But once you get the hang of it, then you can start to focus on other things coming through. So it's the same with QHHT. There's a bit of the process where we just kind of get a vocabulary going and we get used to the process together. And then we go into deeper experiences. And of course, the part that I love the best about QHHT is definitely when we call in the higher self. So we have some experiences in consciousness that you're describing and we're hearing all about. And then we are having an opportunity to kind of step aside and hear what the higher self has to say about it. We call in the higher self, and I remove the background noise from my videos. They're not videos, it's just audio. And I give them to the client so that they have a record of their session. And I can see the sound wave literally change vibrations when we invite the higher self in. So there is magic, I believe. It feels like that to me. And the higher self can help you make sense of what those experiences were about. And I'm asking the questions about what does that have to do with your life now? Again, just going to past lives or going to other experiences or parts of your current life in the past, as a novelty, it's not that helpful to you. So part of the technique is to really connect what you're seeing and what's being revealed in those situations with what's happening now and the questions that you have. And that's part of why it's so magical and beautiful. And this client, who was kind of nervous and worried about it, when we got to her higher self, she had this amazing opportunity to reconnect with memories in her own life that she'd forgotten about. One of them was kind of embarrassing. I'm not going to talk about it. But another one was connecting with a person who was very important to her and who she had not seen in many years because they passed on. And she cried. And when you're lying down and you cry, your tears go like this, right? So she was wearing a lot of mascara, and it kind of like went all over everything, but we don't care because you're in this relaxed state, and I'm never embarrassed. I'm just like, when I see that, I know it's like something important and healing is happening, and it's a beautiful dynamic part of the process. It's so powerful. And then we learned all about why these scenes were shown to her. And she woke up and she had gotten some physical healing for some emotional and some physical things. And when she woke up, she's like, what just happened? I have no idea what that was, but like, that was amazing and powerful. And I don't know where I was, but I feel so much different, and I feel so clear in ways that I never thought. And this is a person who talked to me about maybe doing psychedelics, somebody who is, trying to reconnect with their intuition. And part of the left brain rational thing is that they didn't really recognize how to work with their intuition. So this gave her a vocabulary with her higher self to actually activate and work with that side of her that knows everything, but kind of gets stuck in the middle when we are in our rational mind. Sometimes the rational mind blocks this intuitive information, and so QHHT can be a really powerful way to reconnect with that part of yourself and learn the vocabulary it uses when it's trying to get your attention. For her, she had a lot of energy moving in her body, and she woke up and she was just like, something happened, because now like I'm still feeling all of this energy, all of this activation of my body. And I know that was the part of me that wants to heal me and get my attention and communicate with me. So she forged that connection that she was looking for. And this is a person who wasn't sure it would work because she identified herself as primarily left brain. So beautiful, beautiful, beautiful results. And just lifted my heart so much to see her and to see all of the clarity and transformation that happened as a result of that session. The second client, and I really, really love this, she came here. Thanks, Lian. Love to talk to you more about QHHT if you're interested. I'm always down to nerd out about this stuff. It's so amazing. And yes, weird stuff happens, but like weird, beautiful things. And that part of us that loves us implicitly and wants us to succeed, often we feel confused and stuck because we're not connecting with them. And they're trying to get our attention, and that's a beautiful thing. So the second client came here from another country on her own, and pretty much had not been shown a lot of love in her life. And she had been so focused on work. She was a very highly intuitive child, and she really felt that connection when she was in nature. So when she came here, she got into responsibility mode, and she got into I have to take care of myself mode, and I have to sustain myself mode. And all of that is so important, so important. But she didn't really feel like she had a lot of help. She didn't have a lot of friends because she was working all the time to make ends meet. And she was really feeling very disconnected. She experienced a little bit of, it's never a little bit, like she experienced a trauma, and that really kind of set her back on her life path. It was a tragedy, and part of what she wanted to talk about was that, and get some insight into, why that happened. And her higher self had some amazing things to say about that. But she really came in saying, I analyze everything. I overthink. And when I think about what I'm saying or what I'm not saying, I can replay that for weeks and months about what I said or I didn't say, or how I said it, or what somebody said to me. And she's like, I just go in this spiral, and then I'm out of control. And then I just I get so overwhelmed, and I kind of shut down because it's just too overwhelming. So I don't feel like I'm where I want to be in life because I'm constantly in this spiral of overthinking. And I just feel exhausted. I feel like I don't have hope. And I feel like I'm not in a place that I can achieve my goals and realize my dreams. So, and she also wanted to reconnect with her intuition. She's like, I used to know this vocabulary with my higher self when I was a child, and I was in nature, but I really don't know what to do now. So can you help me with that? I was like, well, you help yourself. I'm just doing the process here. I'm just holding space and doing the process, the amazing Dolores Cannon QHHT process. And what happened was we had to talk about it. So I don't always talk about that with clients. It depends on, how focused they are on it. But I said, listen, you can choose to let this go, and you can choose to use this opportunity to get information from that part of you that wants to give you information. And that's going to be up to you. And, don't worry about me. Like I'm running the bus here because I know the technique. So you don't have to try and organize or control. This is you getting to relax because I'm trained and I have the process. And I promise I will do absolutely everything I can to be there in space with you and create the best possible experience for you. But you got to meet me halfway. And she's like, oh, okay. I saw something in her face change. And then when we went to the hypnosis, she was one of the most amazing clients, describing wise, just how vivid her experience was. It was really, really deep. And she allowed that to happen. And she got some of the most transformative information about her life. And I love this one. I'm going to release a reel soon that talks about it. But this person who's been overthinking and analyzing and feeling such lack of joy, her purpose in life, when we got to that question, asking the higher self, what is her purpose? Her purpose is adventure. And so no wonder she's been feeling so lost and so stuck and so disconnected, because she's been suppressing her life purpose and needing it to make sense. But does adventure make sense? Leaning into your purpose can immediately have an effect on your life. And to receive that information and be told by her higher self, she needs to be happier, she needs to play, she needs to invest in dancing and moving her body and feeling good and treating herself well and forgiving herself and being gentle and kind and nurturing to herself. What more license do you need than that? It was so powerful. And she woke up and she was totally shocked. And she's like, how did this happen? I was like, well, you let the information come through. And she just felt so much relief. There was a lot of emotional healing. She was crying even when we were talking about it at the end, the third part of our session. We just talk about what happened. And she just was like, I cannot believe this happened. And the neatest thing was that she did have some physical healing, got information about the trauma, was able to help her, her higher self was able to help her release that. And to see that nothing went wrong, it wasn't her fault. It was actually something to help her get back on track, because the path that she had been on, this hyper rational thing of needing to make sense and, suffering and not enjoying her life, even though she was working really hard, she was not going down a path that was going to be productive. So unfortunately that happened. Always tragic when that happens, but it also got her attention enough to look inside and say, I need to change something. And her higher self totally came through, and she's like, oh, I feel something in my heart. She cried, her heart expanded. She's like, I feel a lot of energy in my heart. I was like, that's amazing. And so what happened was she started to realize that part of her heart that is related to feeling joy and expansiveness, which she has not been doing, is the part that her higher self uses to communicate with her. So being able to have that way of communicating and recognizing this is your higher self talking to you totally got to her question about, how do I reconnect with my intuition? So we just had the session 2 weeks ago. I haven't spoken to her since then, but I'm so curious to follow up and hear how all of that is going. And that's part of my goal, is when you make the connection with your higher self on purpose and they're using your voice to talk to you about the things that you wonder about you, number one is very powerful. And number two, you then have the feeling and the sensation and the experience of knowing that that is what is happening, so that you don't need me as a facilitator to talk to that part of yourself and gather information. You create the connection where it's very clear that's what's happening. And then you can carry that with you and practice it so that it becomes also like driving a car, backing out of a driveway or whatever. So if anyone has any questions about QHHT, about hypnosis, about right brain versus left brain, I'm not a scientist, but I work with it in this way, I would love nothing more than to chat with you about that. You can send me a DM. You can visit my website, quantumhealingmiami.com. and or drop me an email. So I do this work because transformation is the best possible thing, and this is a very powerful way to get the answers that will help you move forward in your life. And yes, whether you're a right brain person, left brain person, or somewhere in between, you can get results using this process. And I love it because it's different with everybody, and everybody has a different experience, but it's always beautiful. It's always highly relaxing and just powerful to see the transformation and the clarity come through. So leave a comment if you have a question, or get in touch. Otherwise, just remember, you're beautiful, you're powerful, you're amazing. I'll see you next time.